What the reason cycles exist is that the next stage has been determined by what has already happened in the prior stage.
Dalio gives me a headache. The way he put things in perspective, which is completely idiotic, to be honest with you. And the reason why I say that, because he looks at the cup being half empty instead of being half full. He, I don't know, rambles on about the US dollar being the reserve currency, the store of value, and how other countries are gonna stop using the dollar as a reserve currency. Also about the BRICS and China, whatever. Listen, number one thing that I want to say, I don't know how many people are going to watch this, but regardless, I want to say it, and hopefully somebody sees it. But the reason why the US dollar is a reserve currency is not because the United States chose this to be the currency. It's other currencies choosing the US dollar as a parameter. For example, China. Nobody stops from China from debagging their currency against the dollar. Nobody does that. In China, they are free to choose to devalue their currency or let their currency go above the dollar, what the current exchange value. In fact, if they do that, they will lose a lot of their trade surplus that they already have with the United States. Their goods and services will be very expensive for average U.S. consumer. So therefore, they choose their currency to be undervalued against the US dollar. And they also choose to take excess dollars and put it in their accounts. So it's a choice by the Chinese, not the Americans. American government or American trade is not forced upon the Chinese or other countries. This reserve currency status is a made-up thing. It does not exist, actually. What exists is the exchange value, and those exchange values between those countries like China, Japan, United States, Europe, Middle Eastern countries that produce oil, it's all fixed. They don't have to have it fixed. They could let their currency free float, but they don't want to. Because if they do, there are some of these countries' currencies will be valued against the US dollar a lot higher rate, meaning they could not sell their goods and services abroad. Their commodities will be very expensive. They choose to do so. This is a false narrative. Dalio is an idiot or lying, but I don't think he's an idiot, so he's lying, or maybe he completely misunderstands what currency means. One more thing I need to mention: the BRICS countries, they have nothing in common. They have in order for you to have a common currency, you have to have a common nation, or like you have to have unified nation states, a central government, a central bank deciding monetary policy altogether. And this monetary policy might give privilege to a weaker nation or weaker member of that union to the overproducing nation. For example, Germany and the rest of Europe, they have a common currency. Whatever surplus Germany has, pretty much Greece benefits from, because Greece output is not as strong. So, but their buying power is the same way. But it helps the Greek consumer in buying German goods and services. Anyways, regardless of what the issue is, Dalio is an idiot. Dalio does not know what he's talking about. Maybe he does, but he's misrepresenting the facts, and he's telling us about the foreturning. It's not a race. It's not a race between horses who wins and who loses. Okay, United States decrease in world trade compared to China is not United States losing. It's actually China growing. The United States did not lose its output to China. The Chinese gained output. So when I have a big house and my neighbor builds a bigger house or a house just as big as mine, does not mean I lost my house. I still have my house. That's what I'm trying to say. And all these other countries, for the past 100 years, they were agrarian nations. They were not industrialized. Now they're industrializing, so they're having more buying power too. United States corporations sell abroad more than what they sell over here in the United States. Whether it's Apple, Microsoft, GM, Tesla, Starbucks, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, all these multinational companies, most of them are American. They bring a lot of good services. Now, also, we have to mention one more thing. China's rising as a power. Like they say, China still needs oil, still needs goods and services from abroad, like food and raw material. They're not self-sufficient. That's not a sign of a superpower. It's a sign of a secondary power, to be honest with you. They're not a superpower. The superpowers, they are self-sufficient. They don't need anybody from abroad. Like, you could say Russia is one of them, but they're dysfunctional as an economy. They don't have a full functioning economy. The United States is a continent compared to China. They have their own oil. They produce more food than anybody else. They are very self-sufficient. They are not under a threat by an exterior nation, like neighboring nations, or a conflict one within or from the neighbors. It's different. You cannot compare apples and oranges. China and the United States are not the same thing. China is not less for power that way. China is also a powerhouse, an industrial powerhouse, but they need overseas help in order to keep their production high. Also, they need to keep their currency devalued in order to keep their. They could lose this industrial output to any other nation like India, Singapore, Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, other countries in Africa, whatever. You could have a long list of names that could replace China's industrial output in goods and services, like cheap cell phone, cheap electronics and things like that, and clothing and things like that. You cannot compare. Dalio is an idiot, and I don't know why people are giving him so much platform. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Just because he was rich and he's smart and about something in the business world does not mean he's a prophet and he could foresee the future, and he thinks he's right about everything. That's all I want to say.